What's up, Fox and Foxy? And today we are talking about the i5-4570. Now, the i5-4570 that I have today is actually pulled out of an HP ProDesk system, which means that it is not going to be overclockable by any stretch of the imagination. But what I did do was, because this system is DDR3, of course, I pulled out some DDR3 from another computer, the Dell Optiplex that I did a video on a little bit ago, and stuck it in here so this now had 16 gigs of RAM, to give the i5-4570 as much of a chance as possible. Where this test goes a bit awry is that I think I accidentally made a fantastic system, which is a good thing for most people and something that I would actually recommend, but for a benchmarker who's trying to get the most out of their CPU, it's not a fantastic solution. But nonetheless, I'm excited to test out the i5-4570 today, because most of the time it did still hit 100% usage with the GPU, which is a GTX 1650 4GB, one of my favorite graphics cards. And I really thought it would put the heat on the 4570, but that chip really did put a showing, and it is going to gladly be my PC for a good while. Okay, not my main PC, but you know what I mean. From a daily usage perspective, the i5-4570 is a fantastic little chip. You're going to have no issues with its 4 cores, and I think it runs fantastic in 2022. Now, the i5-4570 was launched in Q2 of 2013, and had a recommended customer price of $192 to $202, which is definitely not what they go for on eBay. You're probably looking at around $40 to $60 on eBay. It has 4 cores, 4 threads. It was on the 22 nanometer lithography, has a max turbo frequency of 3.6 gigahertz and a base frequency of 3.2 gigahertz with a TDP of 84 watts. So that is testament to the fact that Intel's newer chips don't suck that much power and give you much better performance. I'm not going to be testing its integrated graphics today, but it does have integrated graphics 4600 and supports up to 32 gigabytes of DDR3. So let's get into this benchmark and show you why I'm so happy that I got this chip. Starting off with Tinytinas Wonderland at 1080p with every setting on medium, which means that I did have to switch some settings to medium because none of the presets really had a fixed option. But I was very glad I did, because we got some better visuals and we were able to see an average frame rate of 68 FPS with a 1% low of 54 and a 0.1% low of 17. That 17 indicates probably one micro stutter that I didn't even notice, because the 1% low was so good. The entire game ran smoothly. Resident Evil Village next at 1080p with the balanced preset, which is essentially their predisposed, I think, medium preset. Had an average frame rate of 75 with a 1% low of 45 and a 0.1% low of 4. Again, although the 0.1% low looks a little bit scary, especially because we're focusing on a CPU with 4 cores and 4 threads today, I assure you that it wasn't a constant thing where it was stuttering over and over again. I would urge you to take a look at the difference between the 1% low and the 0.1% low, because the 1% low is what you're going to see more. Obviously, that was a dumb thing for me to say. But the 0.1% low indicates the micro stutter that you might not even perceive with the regular eye, whereas the 1% low is generally what you're going to see when the game does dip. And that huge difference shows that there wasn't a big difference between 1% and 0.1% in terms of stutter. So definitely recommend playing RE Village on this GPU and CPU combo. God of War at 1080p with the original preset, or what came on the PS4, ran with an average frame rate of 35 FPS, a 1% low of 26, and a 0.1% low of 23. So very smooth throughout. You're going to get a 30 FPS experience with the 1650 and 4570, which I think are going to be a fantastic pairing. Anything like a 1063 gig with this chip should still do a fantastic job even in modern titles. I'm very surprised at how well some of this does. Cyberpunk 2077 next at, of course, 1080p with low settings and low crowd density. We saw an average frame rate of 42, a 1% low of 31, and a 0.1% low of 26. So a really good showing throughout. I was very impressed to see that Cyberpunk ran with a plus 30 FPS average, because I did not expect it. Now, I would not touch the low crowd density option. If you have a better GPU, first of all, upgrade your CPU, because the 4570 and the 1650 would be about as far as I'd be willing to go with this CPU. So I think that maybe a 4790K might be a better option if you are going to stay on this architecture. But nonetheless, keep to low crowd density is essentially the moral of the story, but I was just throwing around options for what you would like to do if you are on this socket, because an upgrade isn't a terrible option. But I think that 4th gen, although the i5 runs well, is getting a little bit long in the tooth. So if you're going to upgrade, I would recommend also upgrading to even, I would say 8th gen Intel or 1st gen Ryzen are pretty fantastic options for a very entry level system. Fortnite at 1080p with high/epic settings had an average frame rate of 49 FPS, a 1% low of 1.4, and a 0.1% low of 1. So Fox, what the hell were you doing thinking of putting a 1650 at high and epic? The reason why I did this is because I figured that if I pumped the graphics up, it would reduce strain on CPU. And as you can see, the 1% and 0.1% low were really bad, and the CPU was constantly pinned at 100. So unfortunately, Fortnite I would consider to be largely unplayable because of the fact that in a highly competitive shooter, the amount of micro stutter we saw and full-on stutters was just not good. Far Cry 6 at 1080p low. For some reason, my document does not have the average frame rate, but I can tell you most of the time it was bouncing between 50 and 60 FPS, a 1% low of 28 and a 0.1% low of 3. Now, any benchmarks that you see that look worse than the benchmark that I am telling you, that is because I had to use an internal capture software in order to get it to work properly. So unfortunately, some of them are going to be a bit sluggish, but at the end of the day, the actual statistics that I'm telling you are what you're going to get. So Far Cry 6 ran pretty well on this combo of CPU and GPU. Now Halo Infinite at 1080p with low, we weren't quite able to hit 60 FPS, and I was having a lot of issues with, I don't want to say it was stutter, because stutter is a very specific thing, but I feel like input lag was a little weird. And generally speaking, the way the frame times worked, I think was a bit off. I ended up clicking the 60 FPS minimum, which made the average frame rate skyrocket from mid 50s to 70 FPS with a 1% low of 32 and a 0.1% low of 19. Now, if this was on any other CPU, I wouldn't be impressed. But because of the fact that I thought our CPU was holding back the GPU, I was surprised to see that actually ticking this meant that we got a plus 60 FPS average, and Halo Infinite ran very well. And last but not least, Rainbow Six Extraction at 1080p with the medium settings saw an average frame rate of 78 with a 1% low of 57 and a 0.1% low of 35. And if you like Rainbow Six Extraction, I'd recommend checking out my second channel because I'm currently playing that for a multi-part series. So that was the i5-4570. And the 1650 did a little bit worse than I had anticipated in terms of correlation to the CPU. I still think the 1650 is a wonderful card, but it gave some interesting results with the 4570, and I think that this would make a fantastic starting budget build. And I'm going to just keep it around for a little bit and keep playing with it and use it as a secondary PC because I think the CPU and GPU combo works perfectly. It runs all the modern games you could hope for. Of course, the 1650 is still driver updated, and it should be for a good while. What I'm surprised by is just how well this CPU handles 1080p. I definitely would recommend it for its price. I have no quarrels to say that, especially because these boards come by pretty cheap. I think that if you wanted to slap together a 4570 build with a 1063 gig, if you can get one for cheap, or anything worse, like a 960 or a 970, I think you'll have a fantastic time with that. But overall, I was very impressed by the CPU. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you're usually doing as always. Buy yourself something nice. Or I guess in the GTX 6050's case, FSR. Fortnite next at 1080p with the high settings.